Welcome to the Prepped and Polished podcast, the podcast that empowers you to take control of your education, featuring weekly interviews with influencers in the world of education, as well as tutoring tips, lessons, and updates. And now, here's your host, Alexis Avila.
And welcome back to the Prepped and Polished podcast. This is episode 134. Make sure you join our community. You can find us on iTunes. We're a What's Hot K through 12 education podcast on iTunes. You can find us on SoundCloud, Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Instagram, and YouTube. Just type Prepped and Polish. Go to our site, preppedandpolished.com, for more information. Sign up for our free monthly newsletter. Have a question or reaction during or after the podcast? Submit your question to radio@preppedandpolished.com. Today on episode 134, I'm talking to John Hupalo, CEO of Invite Education and writer of Plan and Finance Your Family's College Dreams, a parent's step-by-step guide from pre-K to senior year, from the co-founders of Invite Education. John is a nationally recognized expert in education loan finance and private credit student loans. On today's episode, John talks about some key strategies families should employ when planning and financing their child's college education. Now let's get right to our guest. This is episode number 134 with John Hupalo. Hi, John. Thanks for coming on the Prepped and Polished podcast. How are you doing today?
Alexis, I'm doing great. Thanks very much for having me. I very much appreciate it.
Great. Could you share with us a little of your background and perhaps focus on a few pivotal moments that leads you to where you are today as a nationally recognized expert in the area of education loan finance and private credit student loans?
Sure. I've always enjoyed finding ways to do things that I'm really passionate about, where maybe I could have a leadership role, where others are equally passionate, where I could help other people. And for me, really, education has been at the focal point of my career. When I graduated from Boston University, I went to work for a member of Congress in Washington. He had a seat on the Education and Labor Subcommittee, the Appropriations Committee. And interestingly, it was a policy-driven start for me when it comes to the whole education area. After that, I went to NYU and received my MBA and found my way into investment banking, and that was in 1987, and this was the first pivotal moment. It turns out that I was assigned to the education loan group right after the stock market crashed, and I took a real interest in the development at that time of private credit student loan programs. There were only a few of them, and I helped develop a number of those programs with some of the state agencies, including MEFA here in Massachusetts. During that time, I also founded a not-for-profit in New York City to raise money for some homeless organizations. That was really important because it taught me how to rally people around a vision, how to engage them, how to derive energy from their passion as well. And the last real critical piece in my career story came in the period of 2003 to 2008 when I was at First Marblehead Corporation, which was a publicly traded company specializing in private loan origination, so private credit loans. And of course, that business really suffered during the financial crisis. And what was searing for me was hearing calls from borrowers and from parents. Too many of them really didn't understand what it was that they had undertaken when they signed for those private credit loans, and there's a lot of confusion and anger. And that really drove me to think as hard as I could about what I could do to help that, and I enlisted the help of our co-founder, Peter Mazareas, to start Invite Education. The last two experiences that are worthwhile to note is one is I held a position on a school board, and also I'm the parent of two daughters who've been successfully now been accepted to college. One of them graduated, the other's in the midst of that experience.
Wow. Now, can you tell us a little bit about your company, Invite Education, and what types of services Invite Education provides for families and students?
Yeah, sure. Invite Education is really on a mission. We think of it that way, to empower families with more information, tools, and services so they can make more informed decisions when selecting a college. And one of the issues that came out of the anxiety of the last 10 years or so in the whole college market is that college costs continue to accelerate, and parents are completely overwhelmed by the process. As you know, in your business, that folks come when they really need help. And I realized that there are really, when it comes down to it, two questions that families have to answer in the 12th grade. One of them is, can the child get into the school they want to? And then the second is, can that family afford it? And so that's where Invite Education came in. We wanted to build a website to guide families to answer those two important questions. And so from my personal and professional experience, I found that the Internet, although a great resource, sometimes delivers very spotty, sometimes contradictory, sometimes old, not fresh content. So we wanted to create a program that allowed a family in their own way and in their own direction have access to resources. So we wanted to solve what we thought were a number of problems in the market. One is that the existing software programs didn't really have opportunity for families to look at each child individually, but also see the family together. Also, there wasn't another program that provided guidance on those two issues, which are financially, how do we save, how do we get financial aid, how do we responsibly borrow if we have to, but also get some guidance on the academic/college process part of that whole equation. And finally, we were really disheartened when we saw the form and the presentation of a lot of this information. It was very hard to digest, lots in paragraphs and narrative. So what we wanted to do is condense all of that and deliver the content in a way that we call snackable. So if you go to inviteeducation.com today, you can find a Passport for Success, which is this grade-by-grade guidance for student, their financial centers to look at the students specifically and the family holistically. There's a calendar alert system for testing dates for ACT and SAT upcoming dates, for college applications, for scholarship applications. There's a college search, a 529 college savings plan search function there. Also a resource center, which is really meant to be one-stop shopping for everything that a family needs when they're engaged in this process, from savings right through filing their FAFSA and putting their Common App in. So we've really focused on trying to provide a holistic, simple-to-use approach to, again, empower families with better information tools and services.
What an amazing resource. Now, you recently wrote a book published by Peterson's entitled Plan and Finance Your Family's College Dreams, a parent's step-by-step guide from pre-K to senior year. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey of making this book? And I would imagine it took you quite a while to write it, considering you cover so much ground going from pre-K to senior year.
Well, it is a long journey, but one of the things that we recognize is that we believe that it's really critical to start the process as early as possible. So in the book, we say, starting to plan for college with a toddler, what does that mean? Well, what it means is that there are critical years from the time a child is born through 5, 6, 7 years of age, where just even a little bit of savings compounded. That means that the interest earned on the savings is then also available to have more interest earned. When you compound that savings over time, it becomes quite powerful. So the book, frankly, is a labor of love. It has been in the works, I think, literally for probably 15 years now as we've been thinking about these issues. And what we wanted to really do with the book is try to put it in a format where our users of either the inviteeducation.com site or others could just pick up the book and say, you know what, I have a third grader, what should I be doing? I have a 12th grader, what should I be doing? We wanted to try to simplify many of those complex issues that we all have to deal with. And I can give you an example of that. There's a lot of complexity around 529 college savings programs. So we thought, well, rather than dive right into what a 529 is, we took a step back and said, there's some very basic financial concepts like what is risks, what is a conservative investment, what's a riskier investment, which are appropriate for saving. So we spend chapter thinking about and presenting those issues so that when a family says, I'd really like to start saving, what's the right vehicle, they can look at the different comparisons in the book and understand what's right for their particular situation. Some families are best to start with a passbook savings account, collect a little, and then maybe move into another vehicle. Others might start right at the 529. Same thing when we talk about scholarships or how to prepare a college application or how to negotiate appeal for more financial aid. Those are topics, obviously, that are more appealing to late high school students, but it's the same concept. What are the big issues, and how can a family think about their unique situation and have guidance along the way to help them get to the best result possible? So I think if you think of the book, it's a combination of nuts and bolts, need-to-know information about the process. There are some tips on best practices and just some good advice on how to deal with some of these issues.
Definitely, not to mention very illustrative, great charts and graphs on growth for 529, how your money can grow. It's really helpful.
Just on that point, Alexis, one of the issues that I think is really eye-opening. Very early in the book, we talk about why it makes a lot more sense to save rather than borrow. And if your audience is at all interested in why this is important, they should go to page 5, which is the don't wait to save page. And what it tells you is how much more in additional savings that you have to put away each month if you wait a year or 2 or 3. So again, this is all very important information, but our goal is to try to raise those kinds of issues so that they're in a better position when it comes time to start paying those bills.
Wow, that's amazing. When do you find that the average family typically starts their college planning?
That's a great question. The immediate answer is almost always too late. As you know, in your wonderful business, I think what happens is about this time of year, meaning we have rising juniors or rising seniors, some families realize that the clock to college is running very quickly, and they think this is really the time to plan. So that's when I think the alarm bells go off for a lot of families. So when you ask what I think the average is, I think it's probably somewhere around junior year, perhaps when the guidance counselors at the high school say that, it's really time to start. There's one anecdote that sits with me, and when we were trying to think about how we wanted to present Invite Education, a kind of service we wanted to provide, and we talked to a coach, a college planning specialist, who said a family came in. The son, the student, was very highly ranked in his class. He was the captain of the football team. Just one of these all-around, just great kids. And the family said to him, so we'd like to apply to Harvard. And the planner looked at us and said, I just didn't know how to tell them that this student had no chance of getting into Harvard. Why? Because he didn't take any AP courses. He wasn't on that kind of a track. If they had known in ninth grade that they wanted their student to be in that kind of highly selective pool and compete with those kids, the best advice, and what we say on the website and what we say in the book, is to make sure, really as early as the ninth grade, that the academic program that the student's going to undertake and the track record they're going to build freshman year, sophomore year, in the junior year, as they're preparing themselves for that college application process, make sure that that's parallel. Their experience and what they're doing in school and the track record that they're building is on the track so they can be competitive in the school that they want to be competitive in. So it's really important, and I'm a type A planner, so I think about these things, but I also don't believe that a family has to have a 5-year strategic plan to get Sally into Harvard. That's not necessary either, but just a little bit of attention each year, and importantly, attention on the right topics at the right time will really help families prepare themselves for that process.
Wow. What are some key mistakes that you see that parents often make when it comes to college financial planning? Is it just saving too late, too little, too late, or is it?
Well, sometimes that's part of it, but I think the point that we made just a moment ago is that most wait or some wait too long to start the planning process, and then they find that there are critical issues. One of the big issues that your audience should think about right now, and that is the idea that the FAFSA form this year will be available on October 1st rather than on January 1st, accelerating that whole financial aid process, and that the federal government's going to use 2-year prior tax records rather than 1 year is one of those issues. And so what does that mean? What that means is if you have assets in a student's name, those assets now are better to be titled or presented or owned by the parents. And in order to make that happen, it has to be done in their sophomore year. So a real little nuance that can have a pretty significant effect on the amount of that asset base that's actually contributed to the financial aid process. So it's a rather technical point, but it's little points like that that are really critical along the way. So family, I almost guarantee, will happen next year where the new juniors are now becoming the seniors, and someone's going to say, if only I had known in sophomore year that I needed to do that, I would have done it. So I think that's part of it. The second, I think, key mistake is that parents seem to skew to be either overly pessimistic or overly optimistic. So they're overly pessimistic because they believe that they make too much money, their income is too high, or really mistakenly they think their asset base is too high to actually receive financial aid. And, of course, the financial aid awards are driven by income more than assets. So making the mistake of thinking that my asset base is too high is a significant error. And also, whether it really doesn't matter per se if I'm making $75,000 or $750,000 if a school is interested in the student for merit aid. And the merit aid can come in any number of forms. Perhaps, the child's an outstanding oboe player and the school's looking for an oboe player, or in the case of many students, they have a geographical benefit, meaning that perhaps, and this is a real example, I know a student here, a girl, Massachusetts last year, who received a very substantial aid package, a merit aid package, from Trinity College in San Antonio, DePaul University in Indianapolis, and a school in California. And why was that? Because she was geographically diverse. There weren't a lot of applicants in that particular category, and they really wanted a female student with her profile. So again, overly pessimistic when in fact they might get some aid. Perhaps more dangerous are the groups that are overly optimistic, sometimes in the defensive posture, saying, well, I didn't save enough, but my kid is just absolutely outstanding, and we're really banking on a big financial aid package. So I think the right answer is to try and be realistic about what the child's ability is, but also realize that no school should be discounted or taken off a list simply because a parent believes that they're unlikely to get financial aid, because until that award letter comes, you really don't know. There are two others. There are two others that I'll mention quickly. One of those is that not all financial aid is created equally. And what I mean by that is that when the college financial aid package comes, there are generally three types of money in that package. One is the free aid. It doesn't have to be repaid. It doesn't have to be earned. That's the actual, what I think of as the real aid. The second component of the aid is often a work-study job or something like that, where I say that's earned aid. So that's good because it's available. It doesn't need to be repaid. But then I think somewhat trickily, and with tricks in it, I don't believe it's right, but the federal government mandates that schools package federal loans as aid, even though those are absolutely loans. They need to be repaid with interest over time. So it's really important not to make the mistake of thinking, well, I received a financial aid package and the whole thing is covered. Make sure that you understand what those components of the aid package are. And then the last piece is just emotionally. Parents want the very best for their kids. We see that all the time. That happened with us. And I think sometimes they stretch too far. They overextend themselves to ensure that the child goes to the college that child wants, sometimes at all costs. And obviously that can be dangerous either to the parent's retirement or the next near-term economic period for that family with regard to sacrifices they'd have to make sure that child goes to that absolute one school. So I think that's a pretty good survey of some of the mistakes that are made.
Wow, that's amazing. So let's talk Invite Education. So hypothetically, I'm a parent, I have a kid, I want to start my planning. I want to really get on top of this. What will I find with Invite Education? What kind of services do you provide?
Yeah, so let me start off by saying in the book, which is available on Amazon, and I have to say wherever books are sold, it's required by the publisher, so wherever books are sold. But in the very back of the book, there's a code, and it's 3, the number 3, and then free, so 3 free. And what we're offering with the 3 free is a free 3-month trial subscription for inviteeducation.com. And I'll offer that to your audience as well. Anyone who wants to come on should use that code 3FREE. And what they'll find is that it's a very simple entry. You put in your last name, each child's name, the birth year and month, and your zip code. And we use the birth year and month so that we can do more accurate financial projections, because in one of the financial centers it says how much have you saved to date, how much do you want to save per month, and then we project forward to when that student is going to enter college, so we can say you'll have this much saved by the time that student gets to school. So that's what we do with that data. It's all encrypted and safe and all, so there are no security concerns with any of that. And then the second around the zip code is that one of the issues around the 529 plans is that there are over 100 of them. So we use the zip code in 2 ways. One is in the 529 search engine. So if I put in my zip code 02493 here in Massachusetts, the first plans that I see are the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority plans, the U plan and the U fund. So I have my home plans there, and I can compare those to others. And then the second place where we use the zip code is just in the college search, so I can go in there and say, you know what, I'm really interested in seeing all the schools that are within 250 or 500 or 1,000 miles of the zip code, and then those schools come up. So that's how we use it. And the interface is really meant to be very simple to use. And once you put that little bit of information in, you land on a page that you'll come back to each time you enter the site, and you'll immediately see each child's name at the top of a little tab, just like a notebook. And then on the left side, there's navigation to take you to the resource center, the other functions that I talked about before, the calculators, the college list, the calendar, and all those sorts of things. So that's your experience when you come onto the site.
That's amazing. And, just for the listeners, you can find the 3 free 3-month trial code on page 277 of my book, but it's right before the index.
My book too, Alex, so that's good. We have the same book.
Perfect. Now, just wondering, but would this be a good thing to start up if you have a 1-year-old? Or is that a profile?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the answer to that, and what we're trying to achieve at Invite Education, is that it's really never too early to start. It doesn't mean that a parent of a 1-year-old has a lot of time on their hands to think about what college that student might go to, but what you can do is start and then longitudinally just follow the student right through their age. So what's going to happen is each time that the child progresses, so from, call it birth to pre-K, there's one segment, and what we talk about in that segment is how much does college cost now, how much is it going to cost based on the projections from the College Board when that student's going to turn freshman year in college, so they've gotten through high school, what's it likely to cost then based on those projections. And then there's also a search engine. Maybe I want to know how much my alma mater now costs and how much it might cost when that student's ready for school. And again, lots of information about how to choose savings plans, what to think about, so what some of the government programs are. So I think clearly there's value with regard to trying to understand what the progression can be, and certainly understanding and using calculators around the cost of delaying. One of the calculators in the Resource Center is the cost of the delay, so I can afford to save $50 a month if I have to wait, again, as we talked about before, a year or two to start that, or 5 years. What will that cost me? And there is one economic rule of thumb, a financial rule of thumb. It says that it's the rule of 70, and this is up on the site and in the book as well, but basically says that if you take 70 and divide either by the number of years or by the interest rate, then you can figure out how long it takes to double your money. So, for example, if I take 70 and I have 10 years to go before the student starts school, I have to earn 7% interest. You understand. So it really it's a great sort of thumbnail of what can be done and the power of that compounding.
That's awesome. So now that the book is complete, what types of projects are you currently working on?
Well, thank you. The book, as I said, was a labor of love and really just sort of an outpouring of everything we've been thinking about for quite a long time. So my focus right now is really on, and your listeners and you and others, we're soliciting all the information and feedback that we can get about this site. So we really want to make this, absolutely the best-in-class site that's very focused on helping parents with this entire process. So that's part of it. But the rest of what we're thinking about in Invite Education is how to help college students. We're going to come out with what we're calling the college years, so that we can provide service to them once they're out of high school. For instance, issues about are you going to get a job, or are you going to go to grad school? If you're going to get a job, here's how you build your resume. Here's how you interview. Here's an internship database. Here's a job database. All those sorts of things. So there's plenty of work to be done in this area. Also, lots of work to be done in the pre-8th grade. I'm very fascinated right now with the financial literacy programs that are out there. Trying to help 3rd graders and 5th graders and babies, frankly, become more astute and more aware of the power of money and how important it is to understand at least the concepts and develop those from a young age. So, we're not playing any golf, Alexis. I can tell you that, and there's plenty to do, and we're excited to have a chance to do that.
And how can we best get in touch with you?
Yeah, I appreciate that. There are a couple ways. One, if your listeners go to inviteeducation.com, there's a little blue button at the bottom that says "Contact Us," so you can clearly send a message. It'd be terrific if they referenced this podcast as a reference point. But if they don't, we're happy to respond in any case. Also, my email address is John, JOHN, at inviteeducation.com. So just how it sounds, inviteeducation.com. There are 2 E's there. Or by phone. Our office is at 617-807-0320.
Teenage years are an exciting and overwhelming time in one's life. To any teens listening to us today, any words of wisdom before they cross that bridge to young adulthood?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in a lot of ways, adults recognize how absolutely stressful it is to be a teenager today. But quite honestly, I think that our parents look back on our time as well and say, "Wow, I'm glad I'm an adult now and not having to deal with that." So, I think that's a sort of given that the teenage years are very stressful. But the most successful people that I've met did not draw a straight line for what they thought they wanted to do to high school to their eventual career. So when I talk to younger people, I say to be as flexible as you possibly can, be open to opportunities, find something that really excites you and inspires you and makes you passionate, and then it's really pretty easy to get up in the morning and go to work and pursue your dream, and it develops over time. So if that's wisdom, I guess that it is, but I guess that's what it is. But my best 4 words is go find that passion, and you'll be successful.
Terrific. John, thanks for coming on the Prepped and Polished podcast. Hope you can come back, and appreciate your time.
I would love to, Alexis. Thanks for the opportunity, and best of luck to all your listeners. And please feel free to contact us with any feedback you have. We take it all in and very much appreciate it. So thank you again. I appreciate this opportunity.
And this wraps up our show today. This was episode number 134 with John Hupalo of Invite Education and writer of Plan and Finance Your Family's College Dreams. To connect with John and buy his book, you can check out his site, inviteeducation.com, or you can buy his book on Amazon or wherever books are sold. And for a free 3-month trial of Invite Education's college planning and financing tool, go to inviteeducation.com and type in 3, the number 3, free. Type in the number 3, free. I hope you enjoyed episode number 134 with John Hupalo. For another related conversation, check out podcast episode number 19 with Jody Oken on finding college cash. Tune in soon to hear our next podcast episode. Number 135 will be next. It will be our tutoring tips episode. To access today's episode number 134 and all of our podcast episodes, head over to preppedandpolished.com/podcast. Thank you for joining us on the Prepped and Polished podcast. Now go out there and take control of your education.
You've been listening to the Prepped and Polished podcast. For more information, check out preppedandpolished.com. Also, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening. Class dismissed.